Hello, my name is Mariette Hartley. Caring for people with severe mental illness can be challenging, and I want to thank you for the work that you do. My own father struggled with bipolar disorder, and as a family member, I know all too well the value of your compassion and commitment. In today's world, the challenge is how can we best prepare for disasters, public health emergencies, and the threats of terrorism. The video presentation you are about to see will offer recommendations for your agencies and mental health consumers in the event of a community disaster. There was no preparation for the terrorist attack on September 11, 2001. I need not tell you about the devastating impact it had on all of us. Although we could have been more prepared, there were countless examples of how you helped people with serious mental illness. Whether it was in group homes, day hospitals, or in the community, you were often an anchor of support and stability as the world was in crisis. The mental health community learned that not only did you provide your consumers with care, but you stayed on the job those first chaotic days, even walking to and from work. Caregivers all over the state empowered consumers to help others by distributing American flags and by collecting socks for firemen. Your responses were valiant. But we all know that we could have done even more if we had been better prepared. Included in this video are disaster response plans made by the state of New Jersey, how you and your supervisors can prepare, and how you can assist in an immediate crisis. There will also be information on monitoring consumers over time and, crucially, how to take care of yourself. You have a vital role, and your timely intervention during a disaster can mitigate the more serious post-trauma stress reactions among New Jersey citizens with severe mental illness. Here is Commissioner Clifton R. Lacey from the Department of Health and Senior Services in New Jersey.
New Jersey has been challenged by emerging infectious diseases like West Nile virus, SARS, and Lassa fever, by natural disasters like floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes, by intentional acts of harm like the attacks of 9/11 and anthrax bioterrorism. Our location, population density, critical assets, vital infrastructure, and our status as a major travel and transportation hub make New Jersey a focal point for health threats of natural or intentional origin. Health threats will continue to occur. New Jersey is and must continue to be at the forefront of preparedness nationally. As Commissioner of Health and Senior Services, I regard emergency preparedness and response as a top departmental priority. Our department follows an all-hazards approach, preparing our state for biological, chemical, radiological, nuclear, explosive, incendiary, and other public health threats. We have developed and implemented comprehensive preparedness plans which have enhanced our capability to detect, identify, and respond to health threats in an agile, rapid, and coordinated fashion. We've divided New Jersey's public health, healthcare, and emergency medical systems into several defined regions. This regional approach is key to effective command and control, communications, and resource management in times of emergency. Our surveillance capabilities have been improved through the addition of more than 150 professionals statewide, including epidemiologists and other public health experts. We've increased the efficiency and surge capacity of our public health and environmental laboratories. We've developed a smallpox preparedness plan and have vaccinated approximately 700 members of public health and hospital healthcare response teams. Through training exercises, we've enhanced our capability to receive, stage, store, distribute, and dispense pharmaceuticals and supplies from the Strategic National Stockpile. In order for our state to have 48-hour self-sufficiency in the event of a disaster, we've developed and implemented a strategic state stockpile of pharmaceuticals and supplies right here in New Jersey. We have funded New Jersey's hospitals and federally qualified community health centers to improve decontamination capability, obtain additional personal protective equipment, and add negative pressure rooms and isolation capacity. We have funded counties to acquire decontamination trailers and hazmat equipment and training. A health emergency rapid response team of medical and public health experts stands ready, on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to be deployed immediately anywhere in New Jersey to evaluate a suspicious disease or a suspected outbreak. Our state is the first in the nation to have installed 800 megahertz radios in every one of its acute care hospitals and essential agencies of state government to provide non-interruptible contact in the event of failure of conventional means of communication. New Jersey has developed robust preparedness plans and has significantly enhanced the public health and healthcare infrastructure. Our efforts have positioned New Jersey at the leading edge nationally in health emergency and disaster preparedness. This must continue to be a top priority for the department and for the state. We must do so to protect the health and well-being of the people of New Jersey.
In the past few years, the citizens of this country have struggled to understand words such as terrorism, bioterrorism, and weapons of mass destruction. Biological weapons have been used for centuries. Bacteria, fungi, and viruses are used to intentionally infect a wide population. Bioterrorism is the use of disease-causing microorganisms by groups to intimidate and frighten others into granting their demands. Terrorism is defined as the unlawful use of force or violence to intimidate a government or population in the pursuit of political, social, or religious goals. Weapons of mass destruction can be chemical, radiological, thermal, or nuclear. Preparedness is meant to directly prevent the consequences of such harmful, intentional acts. Nurses and doctors are learning how to recognize the symptoms caused by these biological agents and how to access and use communication channels necessary to place a response plan into motion. New Jersey is taking all of the necessary steps to be prepared and to protect its citizens.
The New Jersey Division of Mental Health Services has been preparing for the possibility of disaster for the past 15 years. Our long-standing partnership between the mental health community and the state and county offices of emergency management ensures that mental health is integrated in emergency response planning at all levels. The events of September 11th further validated this need for preparedness. Mental health was and continues to be a vital service in response to that disaster. New Jersey's mental health providers have responded to all types of disasters, from local incidents such as airplane crashes, fires, and deaths in school communities, to major events that threaten whole counties and the entire state. The pipeline explosion in Edison, where hundreds of people were left homeless, the aftermath of Hurricane Floyd, and of course, the World Trade Center attacks. The September 11th terrorist attacks severely tested the state's mental health emergency response plan and overloaded mental health resources. However, through lessons learned from 9/11, New Jersey's mental health emergency response system continues to evolve and improve. Today, there is increased collaboration with our emergency response partners, such as the state and county offices of emergency management and the volunteer organizations active in disaster. We also train mental health providers on an array of topics related to crisis counseling. Our goal is to promote resilience and wellness. We believe that, for the most part, people affected by disaster will not develop serious mental illness. However, we also educate our providers to recognize when people affected by disaster do need more intense clinical services and to provide the necessary referral information. Along with our emergency response partners, we strive for these plans to be revisited and revised based on lessons learned from our experiences.
There are many ways we can protect ourselves in the event of a disaster. With a hurricane or flood, we may have to evacuate. However, there are other occasions, as in a gas explosion or even an intentional event like bioterrorism, where, while protecting mental health consumers, we may be required to shelter in place, keeping people safe where they are. This means we must have the necessary supplies and the ability to communicate.
Being prepared is not only knowing who to call or where to get information on how consumers can get their needs met during those first hours and days after a disaster. For those of you caring for people with serious mental illness, there are other actions and preparations that you need to consider as well. And it's a good idea to include the consumers in the process of planning. Consumers and care providers can put together emergency kits for the food, water, and clothing a consumer may need in the event of an emergency. These kits should include a 3-day supply of water and non-perishable foods, paper goods, a blanket, a change of clothes for each person. Equipment for emergency lighting and communications, such as flashlight and battery-powered portable radios, should be accessible for consumers as well. It is also important to have at least a week's supply of all medications for consumers. Important documents need to be available as well: birth certificates, Medicare, Medicaid cards, and especially prescription information. Both consumers and their care providers should know where these emergency items are kept. All these items will minimize disruption in treatment and maximize stability. Encourage family members to use the same preparation plans at home. Care providers need to keep a telephone directory with all staff numbers. However, these directories should also contain consumer information, direct contact numbers, as well as those of family members. Preparedness is an important step in decreasing one's worries and fears.
The majority of people with serious mental illness respond to a disaster in the same way as you or I. We all experience shock, confusion, and anxiety. For the most part, these symptoms will subside. We will recognize new areas of strength and will be stronger at the broken parts, having survived the disaster. Some of us, however, may be more vulnerable or more intensely affected by the disaster.
We found that in the aftermath of a disaster, people with serious mental illness had a wide range of reactions. For example, some individuals have an increased ability to handle this stress without escalating symptoms of their pre-existing illness. We saw these consumers participating in recovery efforts, often rising to the occasion in a heroic manner. Some clinicians reported that their consumers did not feel isolated from the community at large. In some sense, they felt they were in the same boat as everyone else. However, there are people with severe mental illness whose day-to-day functioning is delicately balanced before a disaster. The added stress of a crisis disrupts this balance. As a result, additional mental health support services, medications, or even hospitalization are necessary to regain stability. The death of a loved one, loss of home or possessions, interrupted treatment services, and disrupted daily routines can cause a burden that exceeds a consumer's ability to cope. Psychological care after a disaster must address these issues, including concrete services for the restoration of basic needs. Finally, a small fraction of people with severe mental illness may also have cognitive impairment, so disasters are not fully understood. There is increasing anxiety as they absorb cues from others in their environment. Care providers have to do their best to convey relevant information in a way that minimizes confusion and anxiety.
One of the consumer's first concerns is the safety of their own family members. It is important for us to help them get this information as quickly as possible. They will also need assistance with attending to their basic needs, such as food, housing, plumbing, electricity, medications, and physical health care. And of course, their mental health services need to be included in the days and weeks following a disaster. People with serious mental illness are not helpless at times of crisis. Many consumers become important resource people in their communities. Some have exceptional helping skills and are able to reach out to others in unique and effective ways. Other consumers have become heroes in their communities because of their tremendous selfless contributions. We should never underestimate what persons with serious mental illness have to offer one another and the general public to meet the challenges of today.
Those first hours and days are the most challenging. For those of you working in group homes or partial hospital settings, you may first learn of an incident in the presence of the consumers in your care.
In order to prepare for future emergencies, we asked caregivers to tell us what was helpful in the aftermath of 9/11.
Before informing the consumers, everyone on the staff met to discuss the information we had. We thought it was important that we give the consumers a single message. We wanted to inform them of the risks without causing more fear and panic.
In addition to helping consumers to be in contact with their families, we found that it worked well for us to talk with them about the need to call our own families. We rotated doing this to ensure that the consumers understood and didn't feel uncertain and abandoned.
We found that trying to keep business as usual, including activities and meals, was helpful for consumers. So stick to your daily routine. At a time when the world appears to be out of control and you can't predict the future, at least you can predict the next moment.
In our group homes, the consumers were watching the television constantly. Seeing the same scenes of destruction over and over was not only upsetting, but we also noticed an increase in their symptoms. Staff discussed the events with them in groups and tried to limit the time the news was on the television.
At the time, it seemed that the right thing to do was to talk to the consumers about our own feelings of shock and confusion. It seemed to help them talk more about their own reactions. We had a feeling of being in this together.
During the immediate hours and days, depending on the nature of the disaster, there will be many decisions to be made. Try to do this as a team in conjunction with the consumer and the administration. Remember, when making a decision, ask yourself, will this provide support, control, and structure? And this should serve as a guide. But what about the long term? How do we help clients in the weeks and months ahead?
How might people with serious mental illness react to disasters and community emergencies? In addition to resiliency, my psychiatric colleagues and I have seen a variety of different responses. First, as you've already heard, people with serious mental illness often have the same reactions as the general population. We can all feel distressed while we cope with this disruption to our lives. We grieve because of our loss, the death of friends and loved ones. In addition, for those people who have experienced a life-threatening situation, it's not unusual to hear concerns of anxiety, sleep difficulties, upsetting dreams, intense and variable emotions, and difficulty concentrating for the first few weeks. These are post-traumatic reactions and not a disorder. Within a short time, these uncomfortable sensations, thoughts, and feelings usually go away. Remember that even if someone is able to cope effectively in the immediate hours after a disaster, they can still develop post-traumatic reactions later. Second, there can be a range of more serious responses that extend beyond the common reactions almost everyone experiences after a traumatic event. You should consider three possibilities. There can be a relapse of the primary mental illness, especially be alert to someone returning to the use of alcohol or drugs. Next, individuals with previous trauma are at greater risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder. In addition, extremely stressful events such as the recent terrorist attacks can exacerbate or cause a relapse of pre-existing post-traumatic stress disorder. Next, individuals may develop new disorders such as post-traumatic stress disorder and/or depression because of the disaster. Those who develop post-traumatic stress disorder repeatedly re-experience the traumatic event, actively avoid reminders of the trauma, and have increased arousal. All of these possibilities result in poorer functioning and increase the need for mental health services. Third, the difficulties experienced by the people you care for may not arise from any illness. Disasters cause chaos. The people you serve may have difficulties because of a disruption in service. They may not have access to their usual support systems and medication. You would play a key role in restoring these services. As care providers, you can compare your consumers' pre-disaster and post-disaster functioning. You are in the best position to monitor their behavior. You know them better than anyone else. What should you monitor in the days, weeks, and months after a disaster? You should observe for worsening symptoms of their primary illness, watch for any decline in functioning, consider the risk of suicide, monitor social skills functioning, and routinely observe for the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. Panic attacks and avoidance behavior are two telltale signs that a person may be developing post-traumatic stress disorder shortly after a disaster. Anyone with these symptoms should be referred for a full psychiatric assessment. After a few months, when everyone else seems to be getting back to normal, if any person in your care is having persistent symptoms or difficulty functioning, a full psychiatric assessment should be done. What will help? Their pre-disaster milieu will provide the best setting to help individuals regain their pre-disaster functioning. Additional support services can be made available if it appears that someone is experiencing increased stress. This includes family intervention, especially if the consumer is worried about how the disaster is affecting family members. Stress management training will help reduce anxiety. And finally, the support of peers may be effective to promote resilience and facilitate coping strategies.
And don't forget about the family. Families can be your best ally as you help consumers weather the storm of disaster. You can pass along these tips from experts who are family liaisons. Educate families and offer open discussion about the normal reactions to disaster. As we mentioned previously, these include depression, anxiety, changes in eating patterns, and sleep disturbances. Families must also know about prolonged responses or exacerbating symptoms of the consumer's illness. These warning signs may require a psychiatric referral. But families can also help to create an environment that is conducive to healing by encouraging contact with peers and friends, maintenance of existing routines, and ensuring the provision of recreational activities. Families are not the only ones to help create an environment that is conducive to healing. There is a great deal we can do as care providers in our own environment. We need to remember to take care of ourselves.
Hi everybody! Thanks for joining us today for our focus group. September 11th was a difficult time for everyone. What did you do personally to get through the days and weeks that followed?
Painting is my passion, so I went to my corner of the house, listened to my music, and imagined I was in another place.
We spent more time together as a family, sharing and talking. We enjoyed our time together, focused more on life-affirming activities.
I turned off the television so I wouldn't be bombarded by images of destruction. Reading and listening to music brought me to a calmer place.
I found that taking deep breaths allowed me to relax. Yoga and exercise also worked for me.
I relaxed by surrounding myself with family and friends. I made sure I kept myself busy.
Meditation and prayer gave me a sense of peace.
As you can see, Self-care takes many shapes and sizes. For me, it can be anything from talking to a friend, taking a nice warm bath, gardening, anything that's nurturing. As care providers, you must protect yourselves during times of stress. We hope the words you have heard over these past few minutes have been helpful. Be sure to visit the website of the New Jersey Center for Public Health Preparedness for additional information. Remember, you are the ones who can best help your mental health consumers at times of community crisis or disaster.